Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the incredibly complex and honestly high-stakes world of the biotech and pharmaceutical industry. We are looking at this massive global sector through a very specific, revealing lens, the SASB sustainability standards. Whether you're an investor, an industry professional, or just someone fascinated by how global healthcare actually works behind the scenes, we're going to translate some seriously dense accounting frameworks into real-world, actionable insights.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by decoding the HCBP classification, then map out the pharma industry spectrum. After that, we're looking at patient safety and access, combating counterfeits and recalls, ethics in the supply chain, and wrapping up with the future of pharma sustainability. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Decoding the HCBP classification. So if you want to measure long-term viability in healthcare, you've got to understand how this sector is actually categorized. Under the Sustainable Industry Classification System, or SICS, biotech and pharma sit squarely under the broader healthcare sector. The official code, HCBP. Why does this even matter? Well, you can't manage or measure what you haven't clearly defined. This classification makes absolutely sure that when we're talking about sustainability risks, we're actually comparing apples to apples across companies doing the exact same type of work.
And that brings us to the authoritative framework we're using today, the SASB standards, which are now under the umbrella of the IFRS Foundation. The big takeaway here is that these aren't just fluffy, feel-good guidelines. Not at all. These standards help companies disclose real sustainability risks that directly impact their cash flows, their access to capital, and their long-term financial survival.
Moving on to Section 2, the pharma industry spectrum.
What does this industry actually look like on the ground? It's a massive spectrum. On one side, you've got brand name medications. This is your high-risk, R&D heavy territory. We're talking billions poured into clinical trials with a huge risk of failure before ever seeing regulatory approval. But then, on the flip side, you have the high-volume manufacturing of generic alternatives. Once a drug's patent expires, these generic makers step in, but they face brutal downward pricing pressures and constant industry consolidation. It's this crazy balancing act between super high-risk innovation and ruthless high-efficiency production.
All right, Section 3, patient safety and access. Let's zoom in from the macro business model down to the actual metrics. The absolute bedrock of pharma sustainability is patient safety and global access. And the level of detail the SASB metrics demand here is just fascinating. They explicitly require companies to detail how they manage clinical trials. See, pharma companies rarely run all these trials in-house anymore. They rely heavily on third-party contract research organizations, or CROs. Because of that, investors really need to know exactly how a company oversees the safety protocols of these external partners all around the globe.
Okay, so a drug makes it through trials safely and hits the market. Awesome. But that brings up a huge question. How do we objectively measure if patients can actually afford it?
This is where we have to look at the stark difference between the list price and the net price. The list price is the wholesale acquisition cost, basically the sticker price. But the net price, that strips away all the complex rebates, the discounts, the returns to show you the real economic reality of what the drug actually earns. By tracking the percentage change in both of these prices, analysts get a clear picture of how much pricing power a company really has and how much pushback they're getting from insurers and patients.
But sustainability isn't just about price. It's about global access. SASB measures this by looking at a company's footprint in treating priority diseases defined by the World Health Organization. Think HIV/AIDS, malaria, influenza, things like that. The standards track the reach of these essential medicines in developing countries, so we can see exactly who is stepping up to provide access where the health needs are literally a matter of life and death.
Which brings us to Section 4, combating counterfeits and recalls.
As these critical drugs enter the global supply chain, they hit a terrifying risk: counterfeiting. And a fake drug doesn't just hurt the bottom line. It genuinely costs lives. To fight this, companies have to deploy advanced traceability tech, like RFID tags and complex barcodes. They literally have to prove they can track a single bottle from the raw chemical sourcing through the manufacturing plant to wholesale distribution and all the way to your local pharmacy counter.
And they can't just passively track these things. To protect the public and their revenue, pharma companies have to go on the offensive. The metrics require them to report the exact number of actions they take to help law enforcement. We're talking aiding in physical raids, seizing counterfeit goods, and even filing criminal charges. It is serious business.
But what happens if a totally authentic drug causes unexpected harm? That's where pharmacovigilance comes in.
Post-market drug safety. Products flagged for adverse events are heavily monitored in global databases, like the WHO's Vigibase. If a severe safety alert pops up, or there's a manufacturing defect, it can trigger massive, unit-wide product recalls. And for investors, that is a colossal financial and reputational nightmare. Next up, Section 5, Ethics in the Supply Chain.
Beyond physical safety, real sustainability demands rock-solid corporate ethics. To guarantee the integrity of ingredients, you can't just trust your suppliers. You have to verify. Companies are required to track the percentage of their facilities going through rigorous third-party audits, like those by the RX360 Consortium. And they have to apply this to their Tier 1 suppliers too, specifically the suppliers making up 90% or more of their total spending. It's basically a massive accountability dragnet.
Because if a company or one of its suppliers fails to maintain good manufacturing practices, the fallout is brutal. Regulators will step in with swift enforcement actions. We're talking warning letters, outright product seizures, or even consent decrees. And from an investor standpoint, these aren't just minor slaps on the wrist. They lead to massive financial losses and reputational damage that can take years to fix.
That strict oversight doesn't stop at the factory. It goes right into the doctor's office. Pharma companies face immense scrutiny and massive fines for false marketing claims. The standards mandate incredibly strict codes of conduct for how sales reps interact with healthcare professionals. Promoting products for unapproved off-label uses, absolutely prohibited.
Finally, Section 6, the future of pharma sustainability.
So, with all these risks swirling around, how is the industry actually preparing for the future? Well, one really forward-looking metric is end-of-life management. We're now measuring the metric tons of pharmaceuticals that companies safely accept back. Reclaiming expired or unwanted drugs is absolutely vital. It prevents black market abuse and stops incredibly potent chemicals from leaching into our environment and water supplies.
Another make-or-break factor for the future, human capital. Simply put, you cannot innovate without brilliant minds. Companies have to aggressively recruit and retain top-tier scientists and R&D staff to navigate this whole landscape. The standards actually track both voluntary and involuntary turnover rates. Why? Because you want to know if a company is bleeding the exact talent it needs to invent the next big life-saving cure.
Ultimately, the source material explicitly connects the dots for us. Entities that manage clinical trials effectively may enhance shareholder value through incremental revenue. By managing these non-financial, human-centric metrics well, like keeping trial patients safe and retaining your best scientists, you directly drive successful innovation and long-term financial success. In this industry, sustainability is literally just good business. Which leaves us with this final thought. In a sector defined by incredible risks and immense rewards, as global healthcare transparency increases, will mastering sustainability and patient safety become the absolute ultimate competitive advantage for investors? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the data behind the decisions.